Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. A little while back I made some really nice soft boxed bags out of this really soft furnishing fabric. It's kind of like a corduroy, but it's incredibly soft. They've been very popular, and when I made them I had this much fabric left in the offcuts. So I have 16 offcuts, and I'm going to make some of these little pouches using up the entire piece of fabric. All it is one length of fabric for the outer and one for the lining. We'll put the whole lot together. We'll be putting a half a zip in. So I'm going to do this using a number 5 zip as well as a number 3 zip. That way you can see the difference between the two different zips. There's barely any difference at all. Oh, and I also have new labels. There it is there. So I'm going to be putting those ones on these products as well. Come along and I'll show you how to make these beautifully soft, fluffy zippered pouches. Now the fabric pieces that I have all vary in height slightly. I'm just going to give you a measurement for one of these bags, and I think this one looks nice and balanced. So we'll use a measurement for this one here. The measurement for this is 50 centimetres wide by 20 centimetres high, or 20 by 7.5 inches. I'm going to be using continuous zips, and I'll be using two different sizes. The one I've already got made up is using the number 5 zip, and we only need to use 1/2 of the tape. So that's the other half here. So when you cut this fabric out, you're better off cutting out enough fabric to make 2 of these bags so that you don't waste the other side of the zip. So this is a number 5. This one is a number 3, which is a smaller zip. And I'm going to use a smaller zip for all of the other pouches. And the reason for that is just to make the zip a little bit more comfortable to sew into the side seam. So whichever zips you decide to use, you need 53 centimetres or 21 inches. And in order to make 2, you're going to need 2 little zipper sliders as well, one for each bag. With the outer fabric, I'm going to run a length of double-sided tape right along the top edge. Once I've done that, peel the tape off. Then I'm going to place one side of that zipper tape along the top edge of my fabric. You want the teeth faced down and the straight edge of your zipper tape to the top of the fabric. Once you've done that, grab another piece of double-sided tape if you're using it, and then we'll place the lining directly over the top of that. If your lining has a printed side, have that facing the outer fabric. And once you've done that, we can take it to the machine and sew all the way down the edge of the zip, and whilst we're over at the machine, we'll do the top stitching. If you're sewing to sell and you want to put labels on your product, the best time to do that is before you actually put your zip sliders on. I've already attached my lining, my zip, and done the top stitching. If you know where you want to place your labels, then you can do that before you even do your zip. If you want your labels centered on the front of your bag, fold your fabric in half and fold one side in half again, and leave an overhang for your 1 centimetre seam allowance, because we have a 1 centimetre seam allowance here. I'll press that, open it out again, and this is the mark that I've made for the centre of my label. So that will centre it from that folded edge to within my seam allowance here. If you're making a lot of them, just take a measurement. I do know that mine is at 10 centimetres or 4 inches from the raw edge, and then I'll just place it a certain amount of rows down. So if you want the label on the front of your bag with your zip opening from left to right, your fold will be on the left and the raw edge on the right. And if you use double-sided tape and you have a whole bunch of it that is really rubbish, stick it on the back of your labels. It's a great way to use up really awful double-sided tape. I position it so that I'm not sewing over the top of it. That way I'm not going to gum up my needles, and it'll secure my labels in place until I'm ready to sew them on. And these labels here are a faux leather label. I've discovered through lots of errors that you do need to use a vinyl foot for these, otherwise they shift and distort. If you use a vinyl foot, it will be so much better. You'll need to have your zipper foot on for this part. I'm using a number 90 or size 14 needle. This is only a soft fabric, so I don't need to have anything too heavy. Once you've done that, open out the fabric, press the lining away from the zip, and then bring it to the back of the fabric and top stitch. Now, because we're not putting zipper tabs on the end of our zips today, we can sew all the way from one end to the next. Okay, with the top stitching done and the labels put in place as well, we can put our zip sliders on. Now, this is the skinny number 3 zipper and this one is the number 5. So I'll start off with the number 5, and what you want to do is bring these two side edges together. Then you'll need to line up that raw edge on the side there. If your zipper tape is uneven on either side, just trim it back so that the teeth line up, and with the curved edge of your zip, we're going to place that on the end of our tape. Make sure that your side seam lines up. Push it on. Usually you'll hear a click when it goes into place, and then push your slider on. Double check that that's nice and straight there, and if that looks good, we can go on to the next step. I won't cut this off just yet, I'll leave it for the time being. That's how your zip is going to look on the top there. We've got the folded edge to the left and the raw edges to the right. The zip slider for the number 3 is a little bit more fiddly to do, but it's done in exactly the same way. I'll just even that out, and again I'll put the curved edge facing me. And that worked first go. From here, you need to make sure you've got your zip open at least part of the way. If you close this zip now and then we close up the bag, it's going to be too difficult for you to get in there. So have your zip open at least part of the way. If it makes you feel more comfortable, you can go and just sew the end of the zip closed, but it's certainly not necessary. Now we're going to separate the lining and the outer fabric, and I will clean this up soon, and line up the side seams so the folded edge where the zip and the fabric meet, I'll clip that together. Okay, this is ready to take to the machine. We're nearly finished with this. These are so quick to make up. We'll start from the folded edge here, sew along, down to the zip, and go over that area a few times. Keep going, stop here and we'll do a back stitch. We're going to leave an opening here, start again with a back stitch and finish at the fold. And then we're going to be making some small boxed corners. Soon I'll be boxing my corners and I know what size I'm going to have them. So what I'm going to do here is go forward and back and just sew over that end there where I'm going to cut out the fabric. That way it won't unravel when I pull the fabric apart to box my corners. I'll do the same at this end. And as I turn the corner, I'll come up, go back and then go forward. When I get to the middle here where my zipper tape is, I'll sew over it and then I'll go back and forward and then I'll continue on. And at the lining I'll do the same thing. Just reinforce the stitching where I know I'm going to cut the fabric. And I'll do a back stitch here and come forward about 3 or 4 fingers width, maybe about 4. Back stitch again and sew to the end. Now that that's done, we can make some small boxed corners, and I think I will do mine at 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take my measurement from the stitching line and from the folded edge. We'll do that from the stitching line on this side and then from the stitching line as well. And on the lining side, we'll do it from the folded edge and the stitching line. So the folded edge on your product is treated the same as the stitching line. And then we can cut out those boxes. Then with the outer fabric, separate the sides and pinch it out. And then we're going to have one seam going in one direction and the other seam going in the opposite direction. That way that will line up nice and evenly, and it will distribute the bulk of the fabric more evenly as well. And we'll do the same for the other side. And I've got this seam at the bottom over to my left. There's no seam on this side, so I'm going to center that and push that seam over to the left just so that it sits nice and flat when it's turned the right way around. And for the lining, we'll do the same thing. Got my seams in opposite directions here. And we're ready to take this to the machine and sew the box corners up. We'll trim the end of the zip off, then we can turn it the right way around. After I've cleaned off all the fluff, of course. I'll double stitch this whole bottom section on the outer fabric, but on the lining I won't need to. So the bag's finished, and all I need to do is turn it the right way around. And to get rid of the fluff, all I've done is grab some masking tape and wrapped it around my hand. And I'm using that to remove as much of that fluff as I can. You can use a damp cloth as well, or a lint brush if you have one. I do not. Trim off the zipper tape. If you feel you need to, you can trim off a couple of extra teeth on the inside there. Depending on how much bulk you have, I will take a couple of little teeth off. It's still within my stitching line, so it's not going to affect the opening of the zip. And then we can turn this the right way around. I think I have to buy myself one of those sticky rollers that you use for dog hair. I get a lot of fluffy fabric. I reckon that'd be perfect. Once you're happy with how everything's turned out, make sure you poke all your corners out. Take your lining. If you pinch the edges and pull it taut, that will help your fabric just to fold under, and we can sew that closed. And then our bags are finished. All right, that's been sewn closed on the end there, and all we need to do is tuck the lining back inside the bag, and let's have a look and see how this has turned out. I love this fabric so much. It's just so soft and snuggly. I'm really happy with these bags, and I'm really happy with the labels as well. You'll notice that I haven't made any allowance for little tabs to hold onto the bag at the side. What I decided to do instead was order some of these little zipper pulls, and I'll show you what they look like. They've got a hard plastic handle on this side and a cord on this side as well, and all you need to do is loop that through the top of your zip slider, and that way when a person wants to open their bag, they just need to grab hold of that. These are going to be much more cost effective for me when it comes to time. I don't have to waste my time making tabs. I still will occasionally, but I felt like my zips needed something extra. So I've just got these in the past couple of days, and I'm attaching them to nearly all of my products. And I do have a link in the description below for these. I bought them from Amazon. You'll find all the details in the description box. And here are the rest of the bags. So I've managed to use up all the pieces, and I just left them in the fabric sizes that I had. This bag here has the bigger number 5 zip, and this one has the number 3 zip. You really can't notice much of a difference at all looking at it from the side. Probably the curve here sits a little bit nicer on the smaller zip, and if you have a look at the tape within the fabric, there's very little difference whatsoever. It really just comes down to personal choice. On this edge here where you've got the seam, it does create a little bit of extra bulk by having the bigger zip in the fabric. When you open that out, oh look, I forgot to close a bag. When you open that out, the lining kind of sticks out and sits in underneath. It's not going to be a problem because as people use the bag, it's not an issue. So that can't really be helped when you don't put zipper tabs in. The number 3 does give you a slightly nicer finish in the corner, but really there's not that much difference at all. So how did you like that bag? All up, I've made 17 of these soft snuggly bags. And I mentioned earlier in the video that I had used the larger piece of fabric to make these box bags. All up, I've made 19 of these. The other 2 fabrics have already been used. And with the remainder of the fabric, this is the matching bag to go with this one. I've only got 4 or 5 of these ones left, and now I've managed to use up all of this fabric. And of course I've made these to sell. So let's have a look and see how long it took me and what I'm going to sell them for. When I work on a project, I usually have an idea in mind of what I'd like to sell these products for. My idea when I started was to sell these for about $25. I think they're nice enough to do that. Now, don't forget my prices are in Australia, everything's expensive, so you can work out the exchange rate wherever you are. But in my mind, I had $25 as my selling point. I'd rather go higher and find that something is good and successful, but also have the opportunity to go down in price if I need to, if the product doesn't sell. If I go too low and they sell really well, then I've done all of that work and I have to do more. We can't have that. So what I did, I set up the fabric to do 5 bags and put the clock on and worked out exactly how long it took me to do everything for these bags. Putting the fusible fleece, cutting the lining, cutting my zips, putting all my zips in, everything from start to finish, including my labels. It worked out that each bag takes just over 20 minutes, I think it was 22 minutes, and my labour rate for myself is $45 an hour. That works out to be $15 per bag just to actually construct the bag. Added to that are my labels. Now these labels haven't come cheap. I think they cost me about $1.35 each. They're a really nice label. Tell me what you think. But they are a fair bit more expensive than the ones I usually use, but I wanted to have something a little bit nicer than my normal labels. So I've got the little tabs here. They don't cost much at all. They are very cheap in a packet of 100. The zips, the zip sliders, my labels, and then anything else that I may have forgotten. So that worked out at just under $5. So $15 labour, $5 for material, that comes to $20. I did say I wanted to have them in the shop for $25, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So that extra $5 is a bonus. If they don't sell at that price, then I know I'm doing something wrong and I can always go down to 20 and I'm still earning the amount of labour that I wanted to earn in the first place. So it just gives me a little bit of leeway, but I do think the bags are nice enough that they will sell at that price. A lot of my zippered bags are around about $25 anyway. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.